T, or Dr. Tomkowitz. I'm the oboe professor at the Schwab School of Music at Columbus State University. And normally when I'm making these all-state tutorial videos, I would say, welcome to the oboe studio at Columbus State University, but I'm at my house now because of the current pandemic. So I apologize if you hear some extra noises. I've got some workers in my kitchen kind of drilling and sawing, and my dog is here keeping me company, so he might snore or bark, but we're just going to do the best that we can today. I also want to just highlight my Schwab Summer Music Festival t-shirt. We have a great summer festival if you're looking for things to do. It runs sort of the end of June into July, and it is a great opportunity to do all kinds of cool things with oboe, reed making, chamber music, master classes, lessons, and some band opportunities and extra chamber music opportunities. So if you're interested in that, you can always contact me or check out the Schwab Summer Music Festival. And we've got Facebook pages and we've got information on the Schwab website. So today we are going to first tackle the middle school Andante Etude for our GMEA 2020-2021. And we're going to break it up into two sort of larger categories. The first category being musicality, and the second category being sort of the technical side of things. The reason why I'm going to tackle the first category of musicality first is that I feel like at the foundation of our playing, if we are thinking about the construction of our phrases and how we want to shape our music, then that helps us use our airstream better, and it usually will help all of the other things on the technical side. So I feel like if we tackle that first, we'll be in really good shape for the technical stuff. So the first thing I want to walk you through is how I am conceptualizing my phrases here. So in my music, I almost always put X's where I feel the high point of any phrase would be. And let me clarify that the high point doesn't necessarily mean the highest note. It kind of means how the composer is using notes and rhythms and harmony to make a shape with the phrase. And the place that has the most emphasis, or like sort of the goal of the phrase, is what I consider the X. So at the very beginning, that F on the downbeat of measure 3 is what I'm considering my first X. And I'm making a little mini crescendo to get to it, and then I'm making a little diminuendo once I reach it. So I've got a little extra hairpin marked in my music. We will give you a shot of my music a little bit later on in the video so you can see all the markings that I put into my piece. So that's our first X, downbeat of measure 3, and I've got some extra hairpin markings here. Now in the next phrase, so we're taking the B flat pickup into measure 5, so B flat, A flat. It's not marked any differently dynamic wise, but I'm going to think of it like as a little, maybe a mezzo forte plus, so a little bit extra than the opening phrase because we're going a little bit higher, and I think this large interval leap at the beginning here just gives us a little extra energy, a little extra excitement, I think, in the music. So in this phrase, I've got a little X, so I should have said I have different sized X's. I have a little X here on the downbeat of that G in measure 7, and then I'm following the crescendo that's printed here, and I have a bigger X on that B flat in measure 8. So that's kind of my bigger moment. And then the E flat pickup into measure 9, from the E flat into the C, and it kind of crosses the staff and jumps down to the next line. I've printed a crescendo, so I'm thinking continuing to increase my volume from the E flat to the C, and I've written in my music the word reach, because this is the biggest moment so far. So E flat, C, so I'm thinking of like taking that E flat and using the air and the energy to reach me up to that C. So for this next phrase, ultimately my X, so I'm thinking long shape, is in measure 11 on the downbeat of that G. Then continuing forward, so I crescendoed a little bit extra into measure 15. So my X is on that E flat, and then again a little bit of a diminuendo there, coming away from that phrase. Now the pickup, the B flat eighth note at the end of measure 16 into 17, I have gone ahead and marked that piano because that is a pickup note into the next phrase, and so it belongs with it. So it would be really weird for us to play I'm exaggerating, but it should be, I think, in the dynamic of the phrase that's coming. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that artistic decision. And I'm going to do that again in a minute with dynamics. But here in this phrase, so I've kind of highlighted two spots here. The first is on the A flat downbeat of measure 18, and I've used the indicated crescendo to help me with that a little bit. And then I relaxed it a tiny bit, so I had a little bit more that I could crescendo through 19 to the downbeat of 20, so that G is sort of my true X there. Then at the end here, this E flat pickup into 18, 19, 20, 21, I've marked that as forte as well because that's a pickup to this last phrase, so I want it to be starting in that same dynamic. And so my shape here is kind of like moving with the energy, moving with a volume to the downbeat of the E flat second bar from the end. Okay, so that's kind of how I've mapped out my phrasing. And usually when I pick up a piece of music, I'll play it through once or twice, and then I immediately start thinking about how I'm going to shape this, how I'm going to phrase this. I'm going to now incorporate what I'm doing for breath, because you might think that breathing would technically be in the technical side of things, but I like to think of the breath as being part of the music and part of the phrasing. So I'm going to talk about it here in the musicality category. So in the opening, I take a breath in. It's kind of obvious, right? So I play the first phrase, and when I get to measure 4, I've got a little O in my music, and I'm only going to open my embouchure and release the pressure, so I'm not going to take any more air in, and I'm not going to physically blow air out. But I'm going to release a little bit of pressure, and that way when I get to measure 8 in my 8th rest, then I'm going to take an inhale. So I got a little I in my music, I'm going to inhale. Then in the next place that we have the next 8th rest, so 10, 11, 12, measure 12, again I got a little O, so just releasing pressure, not fully exhaling. So when I get to the pickup to measure 17, I got an I there, so I'm going to inhale. And then the next 8th rest, so 1, 2, 3, 4, right before the pickup, 4 before the end, I got to have another I there. So I'm not worried about getting too stacked with old air at that point because I'm almost to the end of the etude. So if I feel like I need a little more air to get me to the end, I'll go ahead and take another little sip there, but I may or I may not. So the reason that we let air out or we release the pressure is that we as oboists often feel like our head is going to pop off or we're running out of air when it's actually we've got too much air in our body that we haven't used, and so we start to suffocate because we've got too much air. So we actually need to let air out, and we're pretty unique that way. Not any other instrument has to deal with that. We're sort of like the only ones. So let me play through this for you so you can hear the phrasing, hear what I'm doing with the breath, and just kind of get a sense of what I'm doing with the etude as a whole. And then I'll break down a couple of those technical bits for you that I think might be helpful for you to navigate and be able to play this really cleanly and really musically. I always like to check my tempo. So here's 90. this is kind of a lovely little etude. I really like it. Okay, so the next thing I do when I'm sort of dissecting this piece of music, of course, I look at my key signature, I look at my time signature, see if there's any tempo indications, and here we have Andante and we have quarter note equals 90, so all important information to have as you're starting to learn a piece. I also like to sort of scan through for any weirdness. And by weirdness, I mean like crazy accidentals, grace notes, which we have a few in this one, and alternate fingerings. So I always mark in my music. I never rely on my brain, because when I get into a more high pressure situation, you know, I get out of the comfort of my office or my practice room, my brain has a harder time focusing on the task at hand. And so if I have that information written in my music, that's one less thing that I have to remember, and I can focus a little bit more on the phrasing and the shape of the music and have that information in front of me, so I don't get to a spot and be like, okay, which F was I going to use there? So as you see my music, I've got all those X's printed in, I have all of my breaths printed in, and I have, I use a little pitchfork symbol over every forked F that I'm going to use in this etude. Yes, I have a left F on my oboe, but I thought for the middle school level, there might be many of you that don't have a left F. But if you have a left F, by all means, if you're comfortable using it, you can use this throughout this etude, any place that you might use the forked F. So anytime you have an F that's either preceded by a D or an E flat, or a C sharp, but we don't have any in this etude, or it's followed by E flat or D, you gotta have an alternate F because we can't slide. So I like to know that approaching those Fs so I easily get to the fingering that I need to. So I've got forked Fs marked in measure 3, 6, 7, 11, 13, 15, there's quite a few of them, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 23. And again, you can see all these markings in my music. In just a minute, we'll sort of flash a copy of that on the screen. So I always put those in. And then the other thing, these grace notes. So grace notes are what's called an ornament. It's sort of like a decoration for your main melody. And that's what they're supposed to sound like, just sort of like an extra little ornament, an extra little decoration, a little flourish. And so what we don't want is for the ornament to interfere with the main notes, the main melody or the rhythm. So in this case, all of those figures, it's just a little pair of grace notes, and I am placing them ever so slightly before the beat. So for example, the first set in measure 3, the little F, G, the little baby notes or grace notes, they belong to the F in beat 2. So I practice it first without the grace notes because I want to be sure I understand the basic rhythm here. Beat-a-dum, and I want that second F to land right on beat 2. So now if I want to put those grace notes in, you hear that they come just a little bit, be-dum, ba-da-dum. So I still land on that F right on the downbeat. So that's how I'm approaching every single one of these little pairs of grace notes, just right before the beat. So they're all on beat 2 in each of these measures. So the actual main 8th note of beat 2 is falling right on the beat. I think that is about all I've got for this second one. The slow one here, this Andante. Practice with the metronome. I think the majority of our practice should actually be with the metronome. It's always good to have a tuner on your stand as well. But once you sort of get comfortable with the tempo and the rhythms and the notes and everything, start to do a little bit of practice without the metronome. So when you're in the audition situation and you can't have the metronome playing along with you, you're comfortable. You're comfortable enough to set the tempo and keep the tempo. So if we practice without the metronome, sometimes we get into funny habits of like speeding up unintentionally or slowing way down unintentionally. And we want to make sure we're playing pretty accurately, musically, but accurately. I guess the last thing that I'll mention is the slight retard at the very end. I'm starting to think of it maybe just a little bit before where it's printed. taking bottom, be da 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 dee da, 1 and 2 and 3 and off. So even though the last note is held, notice there's no fermata. I'm continuing to think of my beats and kind of conducting in my head, and I'm also continuing the retard, 1 and 2 and 3 and off. So what I usually like to do kind of at the end of the explanation here is actually put my metronome on and just play it through once with the metronome so you can hear it once, sort of talking about the musicality stuff and now how everything fits in with the metronome. Just be aware that at the very end I'm going to ignore it, so because I want to incorporate that retard. So here is the GMEA 2020-2021 All-State Band Etudes for the middle school, the first one, the slow Andante. Make sure my reed works.